Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day two?
Yeah.
Yesterday was day one of HR Tech. We are here in beautiful, hot Las Vegas. Shane, have you stepped outside of the hotel yet?
I don't think I've been outside in 3 days.
I don't think I'm planning to. Is there a need to step outside?
No. Airplane to the cab to the hotel. Yeah.
It is hot, but we are in the desert here. Well, welcome everybody to HR Tech. I'm joined by my first guest of the day. Before I do that, a quick thank you to our sponsors and friends over at HireRoad. Thank you for your partnership. Thank you for supporting the podcast. And we're thrilled to be working with you guys. So let's get to it. Shane Noe from ClickUp. What's happening, man?
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
How's your Vegas going?
It's good. You know, I actually won some money at the craps table last night. So more than I could say for the last time I was here.
I'm not the brightest bulb in the room, but I've tried to play craps, and I feel like every time I'm just giving them tons of money. Like you have to put up a lot of money to play, right?
Yeah, you do. You have quite a few bets out there, and fortunately, we had a couple hot rollers last night. So.
And it's a good time.
Yeah,
I like to play a little bit of blackjack. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
First and foremost, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Happy to be here.
I want to unpack your background first before we get into ClickUp and what they do there, and really understand how you go from co-founding a music festival to what you're doing today at ClickUp and your journey into data and HR and all that kind of fun stuff. Let's talk about Snow Globe. Tell us what it was all about. What year was this? Let's do a little timestamp.
Yeah, so 2011. At the time, I describe myself as a recovering finance guy, and at the time I was at Apple, and friends and I were really big music festival fans. So after running around the country doing a few of these, a buddy had a crazy idea of we could probably do this ourselves.
Let's pause for a second. What kind of music are we talking about?
Electronic music. Yeah.
So 2011.
Yeah.
Right. Who are we feeling in 2011?
Oh,
Tiesto was still his prime.
Tiesto, Cascade,
Oakenfold, Paul Van Dyke.
Yeah, all of those folks played at the festival.
Back when house music was good. I'm a bit of a house music head, and then it started to split off, and it became EDM, which knows kind of the more commercial side to it too.
Yep.
So let's talk about the Snow Globe Festival.
Yeah. So let's see. We had this crazy idea. We wrote up a business plan. We were going to throw it in the summer and call it Independence, and we absolutely failed the first attempt. I think we were a couple months out, didn't have the permits.
So it's pre-Fire Festival.
Oh yeah. Well, fortunately, we decided to push it instead of plugging ahead like those guys did. But it wound up being a great thing. So we decided instead to do a winter music festival. I knew from high school that the South Lake Tahoe area, had a bunch of 18 to 22-year-olds milling around State Line with nothing to do over New Year's. So we wound up getting in touch with a guy named Chad Donnelly, who had thrown a winter festival in Colorado, and he was looking to do a sister festival. So we had raised a bunch of money, we had a business plan, Chad had the desire to do it, and really the production know-how, partnered with him, and the rest is history. I think the first year, it's rare for these things to sell out in the first year. We sold out in the first year. We had space for about 10,000 people per day. It's a 3-day festival, and ran it for 7 years. Wound up being 20,000 people per day.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so 60,000 over 3 days. And then MTV bought it in 2018.
And what'd they do with it?
They ran it for 2 years, and then COVID happened. So it was great exit timing for us.
Well, it's interesting too, because you're talking about your background in finance and being able to apply that analytical mindset to planning a festival.
Yeah.
And when you think about now what you do, like if you look back on it now, say, this is what I do now, we'll get into that in a moment, the logistics, the planning, the numbers. But what were some of those people analytics that you were using at the festival that you look at now, like, all right, that was kind of a fundamental baseline of what we're doing now?
Yeah, it's interesting the amount of doors that doing something like that opened up. I mean, most of this work happened late at night because we all had real day jobs during the day.
So it was a side hustle.
It was a side hustle, yeah. At the time I was at Apple, working in their financial development program, and then at Google, and then at Box, Okta. So yeah, I always say, even if we had made no money on it, it would have been worth all the work. I think the perspective that you get, being able to see marketing and ticket sales and how to run a street team, artist selection, looking at things like page follows and likes and momentum, and Just pairing that with kind of the finance background, I think it's given me really good perspective in HR, making business cases and things like that.
So how did you find your way into this world?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I've had two big breaks in my career that I think were really pivotal. The first was out of school, getting into Apple's finance development rotation program. So it's a 2-year program, 3 months, kind of supporting finance across different
How was
functions.
it what was the gauntlet like getting into Apple?
So this program, I went to Cal Poly State University in SLO.
Was that a feeder? Is that a feeder for Apple?
No, it's not. Actually, this program was pretty much exclusively Ivy League schools, but the CFO at the time was a Cal Poly grad. So he said, you have to go to my alma mater and pick at least one person every year. And in that year, I was the lucky guy who got the internship.
You're the quota hire.
Right. And then from the internship, there's about a 50% cut. And then, from there it's off to the races. But really getting that perspective and getting to see a lot of different functions in the first 2 years of my career was just awesome perspective.
Was there any intimidation going into a large company right out of school there? I mean, that's the transition that a lot of kids have coming out of college is, having that college lifestyle, and then all of a sudden you're in one of the biggest companies on earth, this giant matrix organization.
Yeah, my peers in the group were definitely incredibly gifted. I think where I had an advantage was coming from a state school and being able to Cal Poly has a learn by doing approach, and so being able to come in and immediately start contributing in Excel and things like that, I think was a big help. But yeah, and Apple in 2011 was the bee's knees, if you remember.
You just walk around with like the swag and.
I probably bought 100 Apple
right.
T-shirts and wear them everywhere. I don't do that anymore, but
walk into bars, be like,
yeah, right.
Ladies, take a look here.
Right.
So how did your path get into the HR people tech space?
So from Apple, did that program, took a role in corporate finance for about 2 years there. Wound up going to Google after that, working in the treasury, doing some really cool. We were doing foreign exchange hedging.
So you had to retire the Apple swag.
I did, yeah. And I got a bunch of Google swag.
The Googler, new Googler,
right?
Noogler, right?
Yeah, they actually do give you a one of those little
the
twisty
beanie hats,
right? And then
they sell them on the black market too, folks.
Yeah.
It's called eBay.
Yeah.
Amazon.
Then wound up at a smaller company, Box. I was really chasing culture there, and that was when I had the second big break in my career, and that was the opportunity to come over to HR. And I think what attracted me about that, well, first of all, this opportunity came up, and I asked all of my mentors, should I take it? And every one of them told me not to go into HR.
Let's pause on that for a moment. How did you? And I preach about this all the time of assembling your council of mentors, advisors, and everything.
Yeah.
How did you go about it? I think it's an important lesson for a lot of folks out there, no matter what stage they're in their life, their career, to have mentors and advisors.
Yeah.
How did you assemble mine's called my Mount Rushmore. How do you or tribe of elders?
Yeah. Yeah. I think people have a desire to give back. I think most of the folks who I would consider mentors had their own mentor in the past, and so it's kind of a way to pay them back, which is, when you're trying to attract those mentors, you feel like you're a burden on them a little bit, but really, actually, most folks are really eager to give back. So
they get so much from it.
Yeah.
Which you don't realize, because if you haven't mentored and a mentee, it's a two-way value prop. Value goes both sides of it.
Yep.
Sharing.
So a lot of it's former bosses or colleagues that I worked with that got along with and stayed in touch, and people love it when you need advice and you ask them for it. So
why did they say no to HR?
Well, so my sample size was pretty biased. It was all finance folks, right? And I think finance, maybe controlling the purse strings goes to your head a little bit. And I think a lot of folks in finance think that is the most important function of the business, and it is a very important function. Don't get me wrong. My mindset has shifted. I think of a business as a culmination of all the talent in the business. So being at the end of the day, your competitive advantage is your people. So getting to contribute to that.
And it's not just a cliche. It's really true.
It's absolutely true.
And if you look around this floor here, there's so many products and services that are basically identical. So what's going to separate it apart? It's going to be the people and the customer service.
Yep.
Right.
That's right.
If all things are equal on a product, give or take, it's going to get into that. Well, it's interesting, and I talk about this a lot too. I think that there has to be that's why, in my opinion, HRBP is one of the greatest positions in an organization when done right.
Yeah.
They could really be that intermediary between the business and the HR and the TA teams. They understand budgets. They understand how roles are being funded
Mhm.
and where it's needed from an ROI business perspective. And once you apply that mindset and the analytics to it, that's the difference maker in an organization when done right. So what was your first foray utilizing your financial background and this new venture into the HR people space?
Yeah, well, that was the opportunity that I saw, was having seen how well other functions use data. Think about sales finance and the plethora of analytics that they use on a regular basis, or NJOPS and the mountains of monitors with dashboards. HR felt like it was really nascent, and that there was an opportunity to maybe move the needle in how folks in HR use data. So that was the hypothesis.
Now, did you have an early assumption that was proven wrong either in practice or by data?
Yes, I think starting out, I took a little bit of a field of dreams approach. If you build it, they will come. And maybe to no one's surprise, having a great suite of analytics doesn't mean people will use your great suite of analytics. So a lot of the journey has really been establishing a culture of data and really disarming data. I think folks are generally scared of math, except maybe in finance.
Yeah, let's get into that too.
Yeah.
And I've been around this world a bit, and data is interesting. And there's a fine line between what data will tell you versus just the feel of someone's performance and the unintangibles and you can't put a number to something that someone's contributing to the culture.
Right.
So let's just talk for a little bit about the current state before you got into ClickUp and what you're building now, up until what you built with the team at ClickUp, which we'll get into. What was like the kind of status quo of people data analytics? What was it telling us? And any dashboard I ever saw was overwhelming. It was an eye chart, and me or somebody as a non-finance minded person is going to look at them and be like, I don't want to see that.
Right. Yeah. I think this is one of the big things to address. In the talk yesterday, we talked a little bit about that too. People think, oh, great, a data guy's coming in, and they think of this super complicated dashboard, and the first question is, how the hell am I going to get in front of my C-level executive and defend all these numbers? I have no idea how they got to this stuff. So you really have to make it simple. And I think starting small, the analogy I like to use is driving a car. Like if you think about being on a freeway, going 80 miles an hour, you are monitoring 3 KPIs in real time, and the stakes are really, really high, right? You're monitoring your speed, you're monitoring your RPMs, your gas tank level.
Or electric.
Yeah, or electric. You're not even thinking about it.
No.
And that's really how you should view analytics. It's just a helpful set of tools to monitor your progress. And the stakes are a lot less high in HR than they are on a freeway.
The podcast would like to thank HireRoad for supporting this series of episodes recorded live at HR Tech in Las Vegas this September. HireRoad is a leading global provider of HR software driven by People Insight, our best-in-class people analytics solution. People Insight by HireRoad delivers implementation in under 1 week. It's a suite of intuitive dashboard visualizations to make sense of your disparate HR data, and a team of analysts to support you every step of the way. They provide a transparent, cost-effective approach to meet companies where they are at in their people and data journey.
And for more info, please visit hireroad.com/POZ, P-O-Z. Thanks.
So for folks that are not familiar, what are some of the key metrics within an organization that are quantifiable from an HR people standpoint?
So I think about it in terms of HR data and then recruiting data. On the HR side, it's turnover is obviously the big one, and cutting that every which way and looking for trends.
It adds to expenses, obviously.
That's right. Yep.
New hires are expensive.
Your promotions, DEI is the topic of interest. And then on the recruiting side, there are so many different metrics you can choose, and everybody's got a different opinion. I tend to like choosing 1 or 2 funnel metrics. And then looking at outcomes. I think there's a lot of interesting things you can do looking at source of candidates and teasing that against quality of hire. And what's different about the recruiting data is HR data is really good. It's almost like finance data. People are getting paid according to it.
Yeah. What are some data points that you look at for HR data?
Let's see.
Class is in session, folks. This is the academic portion of the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, the big ones are obviously turnover, head count. I like to look at cost per head. It really depends and shifts a little bit with what the priorities of the business are. At ClickUp, over the last year, we've really been trying to move more of our workforce to lower cost locations. So taking a look at how we're doing that by function, by level. And then, on the recruiting side, we're really in the process right now of standing up robust recruiting analytics. And that's I find most of the time I like to take a democratic approach and ask people what they want to see. If you do that in recruiting analytics, you're going to get 1,000 different answers.
There's opinions.
So it's a lot better to come with, here's the 13 things that really matter across the different parts of the process. And this is what we're going to monitor to start with.
So we're not going to get into all 13, but I want to dig into one that's kind of a point that hits home for me. It's quality of hire.
Yes.
What's your definition and how do you quantify that?
This one's elusive.
This is...
at Okta, we was able to build a people analytics team, and we spent a lot of whiteboarding sessions noodling on this, and had some crazy ideas as to how we might do it. And then someone came and was like, why don't you just ask the hiring managers? And that was the light bulb moment. It's like, you don't have to have a super quantitative way to get to quality of hire. A hiring manager knows 3 months after a hire whether or not they would make that hire.
Hey, was that a good choice or not?
Exactly.
But then you have an X factor too. Was that person onboarded properly, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I almost think, I don't know if you're a baseball guy. I'm a baseball guy, and one of the metrics I love is WAR, win over replacement. Mm-hmm. Or there's a pitching metric and there's a fielding metric too, over there too. And I always kind of think, like, if it's a replacement or somebody got fired or it's a backfill, how much better is this person than the last person we had in the role, right? And then how do you kind of quantify that? So for me, that's a sign of a good hire. There's always like the gut one, right? It's like, hey, how's that person doing?
Right.
They're great, awesome, check. And then the other kind of tough ones too, I mean, let's get into it. Is there like a time to fill metric, how long the role's been open? Because that has a lot of variables too, which are market driven, company driven, how fast is the funnel? Like, there's so many factors there.
Yeah, I wish we would stop calling it time to fill, because that has no meaning to anybody outside of recruiting.
No.
I've taken to call it apply to offer, because when you see that, it makes more sense.
Right. It's a tighter.
Yep. So from when they apply to when we make an offer, how much time does it take? That's an interesting one, especially you look at it by stage, and you can see.
You have to look at it by stage.
Yep, and seeing where we have hangups. Usually it's either a bottleneck. This one person has to interview every single candidate, or it's a hiring manager who isn't making themselves available. So that's really where I think recruiting analytics, particularly descriptive analytics, can be really helpful. Is just in taking a diagnostic and giving you an area like, hey, this is a flag. Let's go talk to people and see what's happening there.
Now let's take it to the next level here. How do you handle and how do you manage training folks on taking the quant and taking it back to the qual for the C-suite of the hiring managers and saying, here's what's working, here's what's not? I feel like that's where it could be a disconnect, and how do you interpret that? Yeah,
so I have I don't know if I can share it with you, but I'd love to share with you the exact slide that I use when starting.
We're going to put it in the video, we're going to put that slide, he's going to send it to me afterwards. Slide goes right here.
So it is
you can pretend like you're pointing to it.
13 KPIs.
We're going to put it right here.
And what are they? How are they measured? And then most importantly, why are these important? What are they going to tell us? And so really starting from, who cares what you're measuring? What you want to know is what's it going to tell us, and what is the action we take from it? So setting the context up front, and then continuing, really a lot of it's just repeated messaging. So yeah.
So let's bring it up to where we are now, September 2024. What is the next HRTA metric that you're looking to solve or looking to quantify?
Quality of hire is our north.
It's still there. It's a thorn in your side.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I think that is the most important recruiting metric. At the end of the day, our job is to put quality hires in seat.
How do you balance the money side of the house? Are there companies that are asking, is this hire worth it from an ROI perspective when it's a quantifiable type of role? Sales type roles.
So I think looking at range penetration, particularly looking at range penetration across performance ratings, is usually pretty interesting. What you want to see is that your range penetration being of the salary range, how far in is the average candidate. When you look at that by your performance ratings, what you want to see is that the lower performers are lower on that list and the higher performers are higher on that list. And if that's not the case, that's when you can go kind of ask some questions. What's happening here?
Interesting. So let's get the plug in. Tell us about ClickUp. What do you guys do over there?
Yeah, so ClickUp is a pre-IPO company out of San Diego, about 1,000 employees. We have a productivity platform. So we compete with Monday.com and Asana and Jira. It's been very, very cool to work at this company because we are obviously adopters of our own product, and it eliminates a lot of meetings. So if you've ever used like project management software, right? And you take the items in the project and you assign them to people and get a nice, cool looking Gantt chart. It's that concept, but applying it to all of work. And so everything that we do at the company has a task with all the associated documents, all the associated chat. We now have a Slack-like feature, but it just saves a ton of time. So it's been cool to use that, and we use it in recruiting. We use it for things like our rec approval process and prioritizing recs.
And you have to get everyone on board, though. That's the thing with all these companies.
Yeah.
People got to drink the Kool-Aid and get on board the train.
Yeah, it's and there's definitely a little bit of a learning curve, but I think what we see with our customers is once we have a couple of those champions, it takes off. Yeah.
And how's it been working with HireRoad?
Yeah, HireRoad's been awesome. I keep waiting for them to tell me, hey Shane, you're taking too much of our time. We can't make that 19th custom dashboard for you, and they've just been phenomenal in terms of supporting our team. I don't know if your viewers are familiar, but HireRoad is a suite of analytics, and it really they allow you to go from 0 to 60 on analytics within like a week of getting them the data. So I've done it both ways. I've done in-house builds of dashboard suites, and that takes a lot of time. It's very resource intensive, and the time to impact is really long. HireRoad's great because within a week you can get a suite of all the basic dashboards, and then they support you and build custom things from there. So I've been really happy with them.
And time is money. So before we wrap up here, what's your hot take on the return to office mandates? It's a broad, and there's lots of gray areas, but generally speaking.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on this a bit, and I think one thing that's really important for folks to realize is if American workers are all fully remote, that work can be done fully remote in a lower cost country. And so I think we need to be a little bit careful about going, whole hog on remote work, because I think it's going to lead to a lot of offshoring of jobs.
Interesting.
That said, it's pretty clear, at least in tech, folks aren't coming back to the office. We already have distributed workforces, and it works pretty well.
Do you feel like you're missing the camaraderie? And it's not for everybody, especially in tech, but
yeah, if you're going to go full remote, you have to spend budget on bringing people together for offsites.
You have to find those moments. So last but not least, before we wrap it up here, you've had a pretty successful career. Shane, how do you define success?
I think my hope is that at the end of my career, I can look back and say, hey, we moved the needle on data literacy in HR, and HR is running better, and it's more data driven than when I started. And so for me, I guess where I can have the most influence there. I've met a couple of data driven chief people officers, and I don't think there are enough of them. So I hope maybe one day that could be where I land.
All right. Last but not least, pro tip for anyone here at a Vegas convention for work. What's your pro tip?
When you're up, leave the table.
That's how you do it. And where can folks find you? Where can they connect? Where can they learn more?
On LinkedIn. Let's see. I've got if you're interested in some of this analytics stuff, there's a plethora of different things out there. Just Google me. But everything from how to create a capacity model to KPIs that matter. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Shane Noe,
thank you so much for having me.
Awesome.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the Podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.